Now that we've seen how HTML elements and tags work, it's time to explore the bigger picture, what's called the HTML boilerplate. And this will allow us to understand the structure of our HTML files. Just like how there is structure to letters that you would write. For example, there's the section where you have your address, and then you probably would include a dear so-and-so, and then you have the body of your letter, and finally you would write something like yours sincerely, and then your name and signature. Similarly, there is a structure to our HTML files, and it looks something like this. And this is called a boilerplate. It's what you usually start off with when you create any new HTML file. And we're going to go through it line by line so that we understand it. At the top of every HTML file, there should be a doc type declaration, and that's what this tag does. It tells the browser which version of HTML the file was written in. Now, the latest version of HTML is HTML5, and the doc type declaration looks like this, with an angle bracket, an exclamation mark, doc type in all caps, and then HTML. And this line tells any browser that's reading our HTML file that we have written our code in HTML version 5. The next part that we've got is the actual HTML. Now this is going to be the root of the document. It means that everything else, every other element, no matter if it's an H1 or an image or a link, it's all going to go inside the opening and closing tags of the HTML element. And this attribute where it says lang, this is the language of the text content in that element. So for example, if you're writing a website that is going to be targeted at English speakers, then you're going to set your lang to English, EN. Now, this isn't very important for the users who can see your website. It's more important for the users who can't, because there are various screen readers and assistive technologies that will look at this language attribute so that when they read out the website, they can pronounce the words correctly.
Opens profile photo. Follow @YouAngela button.
Now, with the HTML element, we're starting to see the beginnings of a hamburger. There's a bun at the top and there's a bun at the bottom. For those of you guys who have been my long-term friends, you know how much I love food analogies, but this is a great one because when we have an HTML element, usually there is the opening and the closing, and everything that belongs in it is sandwiched inside. Now, the next part of the HTML boilerplate is the head element. And this is an area where important information about our website is placed that is not going to be displayed to the user. It includes things that will help the website render in the browser correctly, but it doesn't include any sort of content like text or images or anything that the user will see. So one of the things that you should always have in the head section is a meta tag for the character set encoding of the web page. And in this case, it's set as UTF-8. What this does is it ensures that the characters that you're using on your website gets displayed correctly. So for example, in certain character sets, it won't allow emojis to render. In other character sets, they won't have certain symbols like multiplication and division symbols. And that's what this meta tag takes care of. Usually, by convention, in our HTML boilerplate, we will simply just include this tag as is using the UTF-8 character set, which is one of the most common. So you don't even have to think about it. Now, another thing that you should have in your head section is the title of your website. And that title is usually what gets displayed up here in the tab bar. And in fact, if you right-click on any website in Chrome, you can click to View Page Source, and you can see we've got our doc type, we've got our HTML element, inside it we've got our head, our character set, and then if we scroll a little bit more, you can see we've got our title here. And in between the opening and closing tags of the title, it tells you what title should be displayed up here. So in our case here, the title will simply say My Website. Now, there's a lot more things that can go into the head element, as you've seen when we looked at the Google homepage. But for now, these two are the most important things that will always go into your HTML files, and it's important to know. We'll cover other tags as we come across them. Now, the next sandwich inside the sandwich, if you will, are 2 slices of tomatoes. No, just kidding. It's actually the body element. Just like a person, after the head element comes the body element. Inside the body element is where we're going to be spending the majority of our time creating and writing our website. This is where all of the content of the website goes. So the text, the titles, the images, the links, everything that you can do with HTML, creating content and structure, goes in between the opening and the closing tags of the body element. So somewhere inside here. Now, what can go in here? Well, we've seen already how an H1 works. So we can put in a heading, we can add images, we can add lots of things. And this is essentially where the meat of our website is going to live. Once our burger collapses down, you can see that this is what a typical website's HTML code is made up of. So no matter what you add into your body, you can vary it up, but by default, most websites will start off with a boilerplate that looks like this. When you're starting out, I often recommend students to type this out when they're creating new websites. And in fact, you can have a go doing this now by going into VS Code, typing out these elements, and creating your website entirely from scratch. Now, we're beginning to see this idea of nesting in an HTML document. And this is going to be a concept that's going to become super important as we learn more and more programming. But it's simple to understand if we come back to this analogy of the hamburger. So we have our HTML element, which has the opening and closing tags here. And it is exactly like our hamburger bun. So this is our top bun and this is our bottom bun. And sandwiched in between is everything that goes inside the HTML element. Now, if we take a look at our body element, then you can see here we've got the opening body tag, which will represent with a slice of tomato, and the closing body tag. And in between those 2 slices of tomato is the content for our website. Now, you'll notice that some of the HTML tags, even though they have an opening and closing tag, they're not on different lines. And that's because if we can fit it on one line and we can see the beginning and the end very easily, then we don't actually need to create several lines. But nonetheless, it's still got a beginning and an end. Now, the important thing for us when we're writing code and we've got all of this sandwiching going on, that we indent our code properly so that you can see that this clearly lines up with the opening tag here. So they are clearly sandwiching something in between. And then we have 2 spaces and we've got the next indentation level here. So this one lines up with the closing tag. And through this kind of indentation, you can quite easily visualize that this head section is clearly embedded inside the HTML section. So just like our lettuce is inside our hamburger, by indenting our code properly, we'll be able to keep our code tidy and we'll be able to see at a glance exactly what our code looks like. Now, finally, because we're using VS Code, I want to tell you about a shortcut that means you don't have to type out this boilerplate every single time. Once you've typed it out once or twice and you know exactly how this boilerplate looks, you can save a lot of time by simply typing ! Hitting enter on the first selection, and then it will automatically insert all of that code for you, saving you a lot of time, especially when you're creating many HTML documents. Now, the important thing here, though, is this only works if you have created a .html website. So notice that when you create a new file inside VS Code, if you name it and save it as something.html, then this trick will work. If you save it with another extension, then it won't. There's a couple of things here that we haven't seen before, a couple more meta tags, and there's a lot of other meta tags. But here we've got one line here which says HTTP equivalent XUA compatible content, i.e. Edge. This basically just keeps our code compatible with Internet Explorer. And in fact, I normally don't write this line anymore because Internet Explorer has been deprecated and is no longer in use. So if you want to keep your code clean, you can actually delete this from your VS Code auto-generated boilerplate. Now the next one tells you the viewport, and it defines how the website should be displayed relative to the screen that it's being rendered on. And this line of code just tells the browser how to display your website when it first opens. So now that we've learned all about HTML boilerplates, it's time to build your own boilerplate, or in this case, build your own burger. As you notice, there are endless numbers of HTML elements, and we're going to be creating our own HTML elements. But the important thing here I want you to understand is how nesting works in HTML and how you can keep your code tidy by using good indentation and keeping good programming practices. If we're building our own imaginary burger, let's imagine the world's best burger. You can have it vegan, you can have it vegetarian, you can have bacon, you can have whatever it is your heart desires, but you have to write it in HTML code. Let's begin by creating a bun. So I've got a bun element that I've created, which has an opening and a closing tag. And I've added an attribute. You can add as many of these attributes as you like. And remember, we add attributes by giving it a name, and then after an equal sign, we give it a value. Now, the next part is for you to invent. So head over to VS Code and build your own burger, adding in whatever elements you want. Add tomatoes, add ham, but make sure that you're keeping the indentation correct and that you're working with this idea of opening and closing tags. But you can be as creative as you like. Be sure to share your code for your burger in the Q&A section. And if you want some inspiration, this is one that I made earlier. But I want you to practice making your own and doing it your way. Have a go at that, and once you're done, head over to the next lesson.